Welcome to episode 69 of Fascinating, a Star Trek podcast. Whom Gods Destroy.
In this week's episode, Kirk and Spock find themselves trapped in an asylum when a rogue patient with the ability to take the form of other people takes control of the facility. Forced into a showdown, Spock's judgment is put to the test as he tries to identify the real Kirk from an imposter. With the fate of the Enterprise resting on his decision, can he find the captain, or will he make a critical error?
He's yours if you wish, Captain.
Oh, thank you. That's very magnanimous of him.
Good evening, Ian. How are you? Magnanimous?
I'm not too bad, Gerry. Have you ever been magnanimous yourself?
I'm always magnanimous.
You sure you know what magnanimous means, Gerry? Certainly since I've had my vaccine, things have been, metal things have stuck to me. Is that what that means?
What did you think of this week's episode?
So it's really reminiscent of Dagger of the Mind from season 1, a little bit reminiscent of The Enemy Within, with a couple of Kirks kicking about, but I thought it was a good episode.
I thought it was a great episode.
Season 3 hits the bullseye once again.
It's not, but continues to exceed expectations. Or in fact, these days my expectations are just that it's a good season.
Yep, it's a good. Yeah, it's perfectly good.
I would go as far to say that this episode would certainly make my top 10, possibly top 5.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I thought it was a very strong episode with a very strong cast.
The guest star was terrific, I have to say.
He was out Shatnering Shatner.
I was going to say, one of the few who could. The scenery was well and truly chewed.
Every last piece, especially that chair sat on the top of the table.
And his little crown that looks like it came out of a Happy Meal.
Yes, or something from Burger King.
It was extraordinarily easy to watch, fun to watch this.
Yes, I'm going to go and look up some more things from his no doubt long and illustrious career.
No doubt, yeah.
Quite an old man as well to be taking on such an energetic role.
Will we discuss this just now, or do you want to wait until the trivia?
Let's wait till the trivia, let folk mull it over.
Right, okay.
Shall we get into the bits and pieces?
Let's crack on.
As ever these days, we begin with a captain's log.
5718.3.
The Enterprise is orbiting a planet called Elba 2.
Was he not in The Wire and Luther?
Yes. And also one of the Star Trek movies.
I'm here all week.
Ah, dear.
Yeah, this Elba planet apparently is poisonous. Well, the atmosphere is.
So they keep an asylum there?
Well, it's only for the criminally insane. Why should we bother about them? I did enjoy this episode. It did have some social issues that appear more regressive than progressive. I think maybe back in the 60s it seemed fine, but they're firing off their mentally ill people to a poisonous planet. That's enough for them. That's fine. They can just get sent out there.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the worst treatment of mental illness I've seen in a programme of that ilk or that age.
No, but they're meant to be in the future is my point.
Sure, I know, but given the perspective of the 60s on mental illness, this is not the most regressive that I've seen.
No, certainly not.
Yeah. They at least don't view it as irresolvable, or I suppose to a certain extent they were up until this medicine got developed. Yeah,
and we can discuss it, I suppose, but I'm not sure the medicine, what they're suggesting, it's almost like a medical lobotomy.
Oh, yeah. Anyhow, the Enterprise is bringing this, as we say, revolutionary new medication which can eliminate mental illness for all time.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the heart's in the right place, isn't it? Let's cure people. At least they accept that it's a condition that can be and should be treated.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, those are loonies, let's just lock them up.
Indeed, like in Batman. They'll all become criminals.
Down on the planet, in the lab, it looks out into a green, smoky, inhospitable planet as Kirk and Spock beam down with the medicine to deliver it directly to Dr. Donald Corey, who is the governor of this place.
Yes, all seems well. He's very welcoming and insists that they join him for dinner a little bit later on.
In fact, he jokes that the force field has now been set, so they have no option.
Indeed. Spock notes there is a new inmate at the facility since they last visited.
Yeah, and Corey confirms there are now 15 of them, but rehabilitation isn't going well, and he has his doubts about this medicine, this wonder drug.
Yeah, Kirk questions this pessimism, but Spock points out that 15 incurably crazy people out of billions isn't too bad.
Which is a fair point.
Yeah.
And then on the wall, Corey shows a photograph of Garth of Izar. He's a former Starship Fleet commander and apparently an idol of Kirk's.
Yes, he recalls hearing about him and learning about some of his work at the Academy. He'd like to meet him.
Yeah, but we should say that he is now an inmate or a patient.
Indeed. He's the 15th.
Yes.
Corey agrees to take them to see Garth.
So we head down to the cells where they enter a room protected by some dressing table lights.
Yes.
And are at first confronted by Marta. Tell me about Marta.
Yeah, she's obviously Orion. We've met Orions before.
Have we? Yeah.
The green people
Mm-hmm.
who dance.
Ah, yes. Often seductively.
You remember from, yes, the menagerie / the cage, I
I
suppose.
do, yeah.
She warns Kirk that this is not the real Corey, but he tells her, or Corey tells her to pipe down, and she tries to persuade Kirk she's not insane, but he walks on by.
I don't think she says he's not the real Corey. That's not what she says. She says he's not the governor. We don't know that, it's not quite as specific as that.
Okay. Spock, though, says that she sounds perfectly rational.
She doesn't.
Well, depends if you believe her. She's telling the truth.
Yeah, I suppose.
Anyhow, we're about to find this out because...
Yeah, well, he leads them past a motley collection of prisoners until they get to Garth, who is treated like, I suppose, a bit like a Hannibal Lecter. He's at the end of the cells and is being restrained in his own particular way.
Yes. Yeah, we see an Andorian, I think, and a Tellarite. You'll remember them from Journey to Babel.
We do. I'm just going to refer to them as the goons from now on.
Okay.
Now, tell me how he is restrained.
How Garth is restrained?
Yes.
Well, he's not. They get to his cell and it's not Garth that's in it at all.
Who is it?
It's Corey again.
Oh, he's floating mid-air.
Yes, looking quite distressed.
And this panting prisoner tells them it is true. Corey has tricked them.
Or Garth has tricked them,
Yes.
as he now reveals himself to be. And he unlocks all of the other cells and the occupants come out.
Yeah, he transforms with a maniacal laugh and into a fur coat before pulling a gun and, as you say, releasing these other prisoners, including Marta, who gather round their leader. I thought this was possibly my favourite pre-credit opening of an episode.
It was really well done, wasn't it?
It was. It was fun, and the twist. There was a twist there that you didn't expect necessarily.
Yes, the fact that she was telling the truth and all that was good.
Yeah. And there is that now, that little bit of genuine suspense that's been created. You think, oh, I want to find out more about this.
Yes, what's happened here, yeah.
So we have the credits, and we return to the cells.
Yes, during the credits, Kirk has been put in the cell with Corey, and we see Spock being dragged away, apparently unconscious.
Yes, although Garth does assure Kirk he will be fine. He then asks if he has to make Corey suffer, and is told to address him by his proper title.
Yeah, it's not Garth or Captain Garth.
Who is it?
It's Lord Garth.
The leader and the future master of the universe.
Yes, like He-Man.
Yes, every time he says this, that's all I can think of. He-Man!
Kirk apologises and then demands that Corey be released from his painful restraints.
However, this is not part of Garth's plans.
I'm afraid that subjugating you won't be enough. You must be confined. And all the people of the galaxy who will not bow to my will must be confined or destroyed.
Captain Garth, listen to me.
Oh, our beloved governor has decided to address us. And we have not given him our permission to speak.
Are you so afraid of him that you must keep him pinned?
I'm afraid of no one. You're all powerless against me.
Thank you. Now, what have you done with the medicine?
The medicine? You mean the poison? I destroyed it, of course.
Destroyed it. It was your only...
Silence! The chatter of inferior weaklings wearies me. And it's time I took command of the Enterprise. You will help me, of course.
Of course.
My crew mutinied. The first use I will make of the Enterprise is to hunt them down and punish them for that.
The crew of the Enterprise will also mutiny.
But they won't. You You see, Captain, there's a helpful technique I've mastered.
Goodbye, darling. I'll miss you.
Such a wonderful performance. There's a smile in his voice.
And Marta as the sidekick's pretty good as well.
She
That was
is.
nicely delivered, that little bit at the end there.
Very much so, yeah. So yeah, at this, we see him transform into Kirk himself as he leaves laughing with Marta.
Indeed, and Kirk checks on Corey, who is concerned what may happen if Garth gains control of the Enterprise.
Yeah, he warns him that he believes Garth's boast about developing the most powerful explosive in the universe. And Kirk asks how he can transform himself.
Yes, and Corey explains that the people of Antos taught him the techniques of cellular metamorphosis to help him restore damaged parts of his body after an incident there.
But he's obviously taken it further than that and now just uses it.
Yeah, he can recreate it and make it look differently. So he can now appear to be others, and the asylum didn't know about this trick.
Yeah. Kirk laments what has become of the genius that he once knew. We are now in the lab again, where Bad Kirk, Garth, notes that the force fields are now off and tells two of his crew to wait out of sight for his orders.
Well, I've noted that he checks the force field is on.
Yeah, maybe I'll be that because later on I have a question because I thought they were off, but yeah, you might
I
be right
think they're
then.
on, yeah.
Okay, fine.
So we get Scotty responding to this signal that he sends to the Enterprise, and Garth asks to be beamed aboard.
Yeah, now for some reason he is put on the screen. This isn't the usual process.
For beaming up, no, but because they're using the station communication rather than the handheld, I think. Or is he using the handheld?
I'm not sure. But in any case, Scotty uses some form of code that we've never heard of before. Queen to Queen is level 3 and he looks for a response to this. This was one of the elements that annoyed me in this episode. Out of nowhere, just for the sake of this story.
What reason was there be for Kirk to put this measure in place on this mission?
Well, here we go. Okay, I have not seen any of the future episodes. I'm assuming that Kirk, before this episode, he's put this new protocol in place. He thinks it's a good level of security. You know, like two-factor authentication.
Well, it's either that or he's got a specific reason to think that he might need this.
If he had a specific reason, he might warn the rest of the crew, listen, here's why I'm doing this. So I don't think he has. He's now put in this new layer of security, and it was required. So I'm assuming that in every successive episode, we will see this being used. Am I right?
I can't remember, probably.
Good.
We'll see.
If it's not used, I'm going to be really quite annoyed.
Yeah.
And I might write
But they're not
letter.
broadcast in the order they were filmed. So.
Well, there should be some. This cannot be a one-off, or else it's nonsense.
Yeah. There's no reason for him to think that someone will impersonate him here.
No.
It's not a known skill that Garth has.
Nope.
So there's no reason to have this measure.
The only reason is that it would be far too simple for Garth to beam up and do what he wanted to do if it was just the usual way of doing things.
Yeah, they need some other protection.
Yeah.
It's a plot device.
Anyway, realising that he might get found out, Garth claims just to be testing and turns off communications before kicking and lashing out in frustration, which transforms him back to his real form, although he looks now slightly less self-assured. And I should say that he goes full shat here.
Oh, he does. He really goes for it. The floor gets one heck of a beating.
Lovely to watch.
It's not the only time in this episode we see this.
No. I think he might be my favourite guest star.
So far.
Yeah.
Anyhow, back on the bridge, we see Scotty, who's not the brightest, wondering what happened there.
Yeah, he's puzzled and asks McCoy why Kirk didn't respond with the counter sign. And the reason is because it's not something that's ever been done before. This is just guff.
Yeah, McCoy declares something must be wrong, but Scotty remains baffled.
Yeah, and he reveals that the chess problem was Kirk's own suggestion, and he definitely wouldn't have forgotten it.
Yeah. He asks Uhura to try and re-establish communications while Sulu reports that the force field on the planet remains in full operation.
And so Scotty arranges for a full armed detail to be beamed down. But because of this force field, there's a problem.
Well, yeah, they can't beam down, so he's got them ready to go. They're on standby, but they can't actually go to the planet.
Scotty has another suggestion.
Yeah, they could blast their way through, but there's a risk.
This is a massive overreaction.
Yeah, he was a bit dicey on a communications
Yeah,
to
so
blow up the planet.
Yeah. Well, no, that's like 4 or 5 steps down the...
Yeah, exactly. With it, and you would need an order to do it, probably.
Of course.
McCoy wonders how they can be powerful enough to wipe out life on the planet, but at the same time completely helpless. Probably because Scotty's in charge.
Yeah. Scotty is hopeless.
Doughball.
Back down to the lab. Garth still seems less energetic, as his 2 pals, his 2 goons, gather around. But he does insist that they are going to take the Enterprise, even if he has to shatter every one of Kirk's bones. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, one by one. Even the ones in the ear.
They could be some of the most painful.
In the detention area, some indeterminate time later, Garth greets Kirk warmly and hopes that he has not been too uncomfortable in his cell.
Yeah, he seems to have the spring back in his step at this point, and he invites him and Spock to dinner.
Yes, Kirk asks how Spock's doing, and he's brought in by Marta, the Andorian, and the Tellarite.
Yeah, she's a nasty wee piece of work, isn't she?
Well, she's not happy.
What does she want to do?
She wants to blow one of his ears off.
Is it because she hates the Vulcans? Are the Vulcans like, are they a race that's generally, there's been a hatred bestowed, like, are they perhaps like the Jewish race where, throughout centuries they've been perhaps
Maybe,
seen, because there are a few times we've had it mentioned, and then here as well there is...
she's from a different species altogether. There's a guy behind her with antennae, and it's Spock's ears that are bothering her.
Yeah.
Who can say? Kirk at this point is let out of his cell and asks whether Corey can come with him for dinner.
Yeah, this isn't an option, is it?
No, he is intentionally not invited as he is fasting.
And it's made clear to Kirk that the offer to dine is not actually an offer, it's more of a demand.
He tries to decline, and a phaser is pointed in his general direction, and he notes that Garth is quite persuasive.
In the dining room, they're sitting, eating, and watching the 2 goons attempt to entertain the diners by demonstrating different sex positions.
Are they?
Well, they may be. I don't know what they're up to.
They're just playing wheelbarrows running round and round.
Yeah. Marta then hand feeds Kirk a grape and is admonished by Garth, although he insists that he is above jealousy.
He calls her treacherous.
Yeah. And he says, no, I mean, Kirk, he's annoyed. He doesn't want this attention, which is maybe correct. I'm not sure, but he's definitely jealous.
Kirk denies this anyway. He says he's quite fine.
Oh, there is a sort of there's a chemistry between Garth and Martha.
Yeah.
It's quite fun to watch that as well. I thought that was a nice dynamic. Sure,
he threatens at this point to have her beaten to death, but she claims he won't because she's the most beautiful woman on the planet.
And then he calls her a stupid cow and reminds her that she's the only woman on the planet and calls her repulsive.
He does. She retorts that she's both beautiful and intelligent, a poet, a painter, and a dancer.
Garth claims she's full of it and asks her to recite a poem. And while she prepares to perform, Spock whispers to Kirk that if he can create a diversion, he might be able to find the force field control room. There's always a control room, isn't there? There's always a computer room that you just need to turn something off and be fine.
This never happens. No diversion gets created at any stage.
No. Martha does perform, however.
She does. The 2 of them are told to shut up by Garth and pay attention.
What does she perform?
Shakespeare, but she claims to have written it herself.
Yeah, the previous day.
And says that even if Shakespeare did write it first, she also independently came up with it.
He threatens to kill her.
Once again, with his bare hands.
But then admits that she is a superb dancer and orders her to do this instead. And as she does, Spock is asked his opinion, and he admits to Garth that it is mildly interesting, not fascinating.
And somewhat nostalgic, he says.
Yeah.
Reminding him of the dances that Vulcan children do, albeit in a less coordinated way.
So she slithers around and takes the applause at the end. And Kirk thanks Garth, who offers her to him, as we heard at the
top of the show, yeah. Garth says that he is magnanimous to his friends and merciless to his enemies and hopes that Kirk and Spock will be friends.
Spock makes a good point and asks a good question. What is the basis for this friendship?
Garth goes for enlightened self-interest.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's a basis for anything.
No, not at all. He then goes on to flatter Kirk, who proceeds to tell him he is more of an explorer than a military leader these days, and Garth claims to be the same.
Kirk points out that he did try to destroy Antos 4 and all the people living there.
I mean, come on.
It turns out that they saved him when he was maimed and injured, and this is where he got that skill for changing shape. And in return, he offered them the galaxy and destroyed them for their ingratitude when they refused.
Spock wants to know how he thought that a Starfleet crew would obey him and destroy an entire race. And at this point, he agrees that that was one minor slip-up.
That was my only miscalculation. I had changed. I had risen above this decadent weakness, which still has you in its command, by the way, Captain. My crew had not. I couldn't sway them. But my new crew, the men in this room, will obey my orders without question. Gentlemen, you have eyes, but you cannot see. Galaxies surround us. Limitless vistas. And yet, the Federation would have us grub away like some ants on some somewhat larger than usual anthill. But I am not an insect. I am master of the universe, and I must claim my domain.
I agree there was a time when war was necessary, and you were our greatest warrior. I studied your victory at Axanar when I was a cadet. In fact, it still required reading at the academy.
As well it should be.
Very well. But my first visit to Axanar was as a new-fledged cadet on a peace mission.
Peace mission! Politicians and weaklings!
They were humanitarians and statesmen. And they had a dream. A dream that became a reality and spread throughout the stars. A dream that made Mr. Spock and me brothers.
Mr. Spock! Do you consider Captain Kirk and yourself brothers?
See it again, wonderful. Listen to him all night.
I should revise something I said earlier. I think I said he destroyed all the people. I think he wanted to, but his crew stopped him. That's what I'm getting from the...
Okay. Yes, I'm not sure how much of this is just him being a fantasist and how much he actually has done or is likely to be able to do.
Yeah. After he asks Spock whether he agrees with Kirk, Spock says he does, although Kirk was speaking somewhat figuratively and with undue emotion. Yeah,
and then Garth tries to drive a wedge between them by claiming that he is nothing more than a subordinate and he will have his own command should he join him. We've had this before where...
Yeah, the Romulan commander in the Enterprise incident promised him his own ship, but we know that Spock's not interested in that.
No. He also tells them that his fleet is outside and they will flock to him as he will offer them limitless power. And at this point I'm thinking, this guy is just, he's off his rocker here.
Yeah, he thinks that once he raises his banner, all these people from other worlds will flock to him and stand behind him and
I think he
rally to it.
Yeah, I think he calls his crew the elite, and they will take over their solar systems from the decadent weaklings that currently rule them.
We get a flash of anger once again when Kirk addresses him as captain.
Yeah, he insists on being called Lord.
I think Kirk knows this. He's doing it on purpose. This is at least the second time.
I'd like to think so, yeah. And Spock points out that he is recreating the disaster that got him locked up in the first place.
Garth claims that he was treated barbarically and he's been betrayed, but this is rejected by Spock, who says he received nothing but justice and compassion, which gets him hauled away.
Yeah, I think Garth screams for the animal to be removed. And as he's dragged off, Garth tells Kirk to remain with him.
Yeah, well, he pulls his phaser and makes him remain. Yeah. Kirk stands.
He then calls on Marta and tells Kirk that the entertainment has just begun before asking him how he would respond to Queen's level 3.
Yeah, Kirk tells him there's an infinite number of counter moves.
But a threat of death is Garth's response.
Yeah, Kirk says there's no point in that because he's of no use if he's dead.
At this point, I would just be getting the old needles, hammer and testicles out. Not my own.
No.
Kirk's.
I think a wee bit earlier, Kirk made a reference to Scotty having a patrol ready. How did he know that Garth had tried to contact the Enterprise? This is an assumption. And that he knows now that he gets the Queen's Queen level 3 gambit, but he didn't have that information previously.
No.
Although maybe you could assume based on the fact that he said he wanted to take over the Enterprise.
It'd be an obvious assumption, I suppose.
Yeah.
Garth correctly lets him know that he can make him beg for death, as Marta starts spouting poetry again, which causes Garth to roll his eyes.
Kirk says it's very good. Once again, it's not her own, it's traditional poetry.
And she seems to appreciate the praise. as she leans in for a kiss and advises him to tell Garth what he wants to hear, and then they can go away together. This is quite the... she's moving very fast here.
Yeah, and she's not doing it very subtly.
No.
Garth's right there.
Which is going to lead me on to my question that we'll get to shortly.
Okay.
She begs him to do this and is pulled away by Garth, who calls it degrading, before he asks Kirk again for the answer and promises him he will talk soon.
A big chair that we saw in Dagger of the Mind gets wheeled in.
Yeah, I think it's meant to be a rehabilitation chair.
I think Corey gets brought in at this point as well.
Yeah, and we find out that changes have been made to it. It's no longer a rehabilitation chair, as it causes quite a lot of pain.
Indeed. And as no tissue is damaged, the pain can be continued indefinitely.
And Corey, he is placed into it. However, Kirk still refuses to answer.
Yes, he does break very quickly as usual and calls for the torture to stop. He's not good at watching people be tortured.
Yeah, but as soon as it stops, he reverts to type and doesn't answer.
Yeah, so he gets placed in the chair himself, having failed to run away. He made a wee break for it.
Yeah. Even though Marta annoys Garth by begging him not to do this, and the torture begins.
Yeah, Marta continues to beg for mercy for Kirk and tells Garth she can get him to give up the information.
And she admits that she wants him. Of course she does. Everyone, no matter what species you are, everyone wants a bit of Kirk.
Well, she is mental.
True.
Are we allowed to use that? It's fiction, right?
Yeah.
That's how they've been written.
Exactly.
Up on the Enterprise bridge, briefly, Uhura reports still no response from the planet, and Sulu tells Scotty that the force field is weakest, as previously advised, on the far side of the planet.
But that doesn't really help them.
Well, no, they could send a shuttle, but McCoy astutely notes that the plan couldn't work because there's a very poisonous atmosphere. They'd have a long way to walk in it, and they wouldn't be able to carry anything that they would need to get into the asylum.
And then for some reason, Scotty tells McCoy that they may already be dead. There's no...
All he had was a missed call, basically.
Yes.
Oh, they probably did.
Phone up the wife and she doesn't answer. Well, I better get myself onto Tinder.
Yeah, that's it. Probably did. I mean,
what other explanation could it possibly be?
Exactly. Back down in a room we've not seen before.
Well, it's a bedroom, isn't it?
Why is there a bedroom? Is it Corey's bedroom?
Don't know, it's a bedroom. It's a seduction room.
Anyway, Marta is waking Kirk and giving him a drink of something.
Before she proceeds with her seduction by admitting that Garth wants her to get the truth out of him, but claims that she's loved him since the first time she saw him. I mean, what?
Well, he did say he's been before, remember?
Really?
Right at the start, they say there's one new inmate since our last visit.
Okay.
So maybe she's seen him in the past.
Possibly. He then tries to persuade her to join his side for her own good.
Marta, I can help you. But I must get to the Enterprise to do that.
That's not possible.
Oh, yes, it is. It is. If I can get to the control room and remove the force field, and Garth is finished.
Garth is my leader.
He will lead you to destruction. He's already destroyed the medicine that could have helped you. But there's more medicine aboard the ship.
I'll help you, but you must wait. You do see that, don't you? Soon your friend Spock will be here, and then...
Spock?
At least I've arranged that much.
How did you manage that?
A convincing lie told to a guard who finds me desirable. Darling.
So yeah, at the end there, we hear she tries to basic instinct.
Yeah, she pulls a knife / ice pick out from under the pillow.
Why should... I don't understand this. Okay, so...
She's criminally insane.
Well, that would be an obvious answer, because I assumed that she was working... Because she'd said to Garth, listen, I can get this information out of him. Let's, try the carrot rather than the stick. So I thought that she was...
It's not logical, I don't think she's following a plan here.
So, yes, in her head, she kills him for what purpose?
Because he's her lover and she must.
Oh, okay. Is that how you...
That's what she says.
So she was just going to kill him for... There was no
Yeah, just because that's the way that she's crazy.
Okay.
No, that was my interpretation of it. I don't think there was any deeper plan to it. Garth certainly didn't instruct it. He wants Kirk alive to get the information.
Now, here's the thing. So we're going to... Spock comes in and... Did you mention that there?
No, but he does at this point and stands on the knife.
And nerve pinches.
Yes.
Now, you've got a question based on what we're about to find out.
Yes.
Let's talk about it just now. So it turns out that Spock's actually Garth.
Yes, so how does he nerve pinch her?
But see, that would lead me to reconsider her motive. So let's assume that she's doing this in league with Garth. So she pretends...
That Spock's coming.
Well, she knows, so she doesn't actually get knocked out. She goes to kill Kirk, but knows that Garth as Spock is going to come and then be seen to save Kirk, which would then encourage Kirk to believe or have faith that this is...
That's a possibility, yeah. To trust him.
To trust, yeah, build trust and it's the real Spock.
Yeah.
So they might be working together to do this.
It's possible. Definitely possible.
In any case, Spock, who has just saved Kirk, has a gun. Although he is sort of pointing it, waving it around rather ominously.
Yeah.
And they head off to the control room.
Yep. They stun the Tellarite who's standing outside and Kirk takes his weapon.
Inside the control room, Spock easily finds, and this again should be a clue, he easily finds and disables the force field.
That's a big button that says on off.
Yeah, but you don't know, it doesn't say force field, does it?
I think maybe they saw, I don't know, maybe not, but I thought maybe they saw Corey put it on when they arrived.
It's also a little bit of a giveaway. If it's Garth, because he goes right to it, reminds me of the Columbo episode with Culp. What way, left or right?
Yeah, this, yeah. So they contact the Enterprise and Scotty tells Kirk they were worried.
Yes, and Kirk tells him to get security down on the double and to have McCoy ready with additional medicine. Spock then suspiciously advises Kirk to get back to the Enterprise ASAP and tells Scotty to beam him back immediately.
Yes, Kirk agrees to do this, but when Scotty gives the call sign, he suggests that Spock answer.
So the ruse is up. Spock backs off with his weapon raised and tells Kirk to give the response as he turns the force field back on and returns to his natural state.
Yes, communication I think gets cut off and Garth tells Kirk that the phaser he recovered from the Tellarite won't work.
No, he laughs at him. Do you think I'm going to give you an actual weapon? Yeah, an idiot.
Yeah. Kirk asks what's happened to the real Spock and is told that he's safe for now, but he will soon die horribly and it will be on Kirk's conscience.
So Kirk has a little think and tries a new approach to appeal to Garth's former self as the greatest fleet commander of them all.
Yes, he calls him captain again and then when challenged insists that it's an honourable title and that Garth then says he himself was the greatest of them all.
He tells him he's sick and needs to think back to what he was before the accident that sent him to Antos 4, but he claims he can't remember anything.
This is a clinical method for treating mental illness.
Yeah, this is how you do it.
Kirk's figured it out. Just tell them about their past.
Garth says it feels as if he died and was reborn, but Kirk tells him that he can remember, and he was the finest student and finest captain, a model for the rest of them.
Yes, Garth says he remembers it was a great responsibility, but one he was proud to bear.
I think, you see, we've seen this a few times in the episode, Kirk's playing on Garth's ego.
Yes, of course he is, yes. Kirk tells him the disease that changed him is not his fault, and he's not truly responsible for the atrocities that he did.
But at this point, yeah, Garth, I think he sees through this ploy and thinks Kirk is trying to drain him of his strength. But this is denied, and Kirk says he wants him to return to greatness as Captain Garth.
Garth doesn't want to hear it. He says that Kirk only doubts him because he has not yet been crowned Master of the Universe. And he forces Kirk to kneel and lists failed dictators, including Caesar, Napoleon and Hitler, that he is going to outdo.
It's quite a feat, yeah?
Yeah.
As he is talking, Kirk backs up towards the control unit and attempts to turn off the force field, but is predictably stunned unconscious. And rightly so. I mean, it wasn't very subtle.
No. In the dining room.
Well, it's now the coronation room.
Well, it's being rearranged. A chair is put on top of a table.
Yes, Kirk comes round, being held up by the two goons, to find that Garth is about to have this coronation of his. And even this normal chair is now acting as a throne.
It's laughable.
Yeah, and he has a crown for the occasion as well.
That's also laughable.
A little bit of tinfoil.
He tells Kirk that the symbolism is important, and Kirk agrees. And Garth says, although not in itself impressive, the crown is a symbol around which people will rally.
I think Kirk tries to point out that look how ridiculous this is. You've got about 5 people, 5 support. You're not taking over solar systems or the the galaxy.
Garth asks him to get into the spirit of things, though, offering him a couple of different roles. Firstly, human sacrifice.
Or
heir apparent.
can I think about that for a second? Yep, I'll take the heir apparent one, please.
He does. And Garth leaves and returns with Marta on his arm, and she carries a crown on a pillow as they walk between the handful of inmates.
He then announces that he will perform the ceremony himself and immediately proclaims himself Lord Garth, Master of the Universe, as he places the crown on his head before Marta is named consort and Kirk heir apparent.
Yes, Marta's given a necklace at this point, and Garth walks up and down before climbing up onto the table and sitting on the chair that's on top of it. And Kirk is then removed by the Andorian and the Tellarite.
Yeah, so the ceremony can be concluded. I mean, what's that for?
Who knows?
Maybe you have to consummate the...
Maybe, but there's other people there.
Yeah, but he wouldn't worry about them, but he doesn't want Kirk's arrival.
Yeah. For some reason, Kirk's taken to the control room.
I don't know what this is all about.
And he tries to persuade the Andorian and the Tellarite to turn on Garth, but when he again goes for the force field, he gets thumped.
He's knocked to the ground just as Garth strides in. He is then placed in a chair as Garth describes himself as a genius and has apparently produced the most powerful explosive ever made.
Yeah, it could vaporise the planet, apparently, just the small amount that he has on his hand.
Yeah, I've got questions about this as well, because we see later, a little bit later, that there is an explosive here.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm never too sure about how much of this is his fantasy, how much of a crazy that he is, and how much he actually can achieve and has done. Yeah,
it's not made clear.
No.
I imagine it's maybe explosive, but probably not the greatest explosive ever.
Sure.
But I don't know.
In any case, he holds it in a flask and claims that if he were to drop it, it would vaporise the planet. He then decides to offer a demonstration and proceeds to open the viewing window to outside, where Kirk sees Marta being left without any protective clothing.
In the poisonous atmosphere, yes. There's two folk in hazmat suits taking her out there.
Garth points out that she will die from the conditions anyway, but decides to speed things up.
Yes, in the necklace that he gave her during the coronation, he's placed one drop, I think he says.
Or a grain, yeah.
Or a grain of this explosive. And as she begins to suffocate, he brings that to a swift end by detonating it.
Yeah, he pushes a button and she ends up in thousands of pieces.
Yeah, bye-bye, Marta.
As Kirk watches on in horror. Back up on the bridge, Sulu informs Scotty of the explosion. So it is powerful enough for us to be detected up.
Well, apparently it's massive because they're surprised that anyone is still alive on the planet after that size of explosion.
Mm-hmm. And he was a military captain. He wasn't a scientist. I mean, how is he? And he's got this ragbag team of followers. How is he inventing the most explosive?
It's convenient for the plot.
Clearly.
Where did he get it from?
Exactly.
Like, even if he knew how to make it, surely they didn't keep it in his locker when he get checked in. Anyhow, Sulu reports the force field has remained in place, and Uhura confirms that the life signs are still present. McCoy remains anxious, but Scotty has one more idea, which is the same as an idea he had before.
What's that?
To cut through the force field at its weakest point. So they adjust their orbit and they try it, but it doesn't work. Good work, good one, Scotty.
Utter failure. Back in the control room, Garth and the goons are throwing around the bomb like a football, and Kirk points out that whatever happens to him will happen to them also.
Yes, at this point Garth calls for Spock to be brought because he thinks he can establish a rapport with him.
So, in the cells, Spock pretends to be unconscious when the goons arrive, which allows him to nerve pinch them as they attempt to drag him out.
Simultaneously.
Is that a good way? The old double... I'm not sure if I've seen that before.
No, we don't see it again either.
Is that a bit of trivia you had for us, yeah?
It's a bit of trivia. I don't know if I've written it down.
Okay. It's quite good.
Yeah. He takes one of their phasers, heads off on his own, and Garth is alerted to this by an alarm that sounds.
Yeah, at the time he is insulting Kirk by claiming that not only is Spock more logical, but he's also more intelligent. Now, that's probably not going to insult Kirk, but if he says he's better looking and the ladies like him more than you, that would really...
Yeah, exactly.
In any case, he intends to establish a rapport with him. He then turns on a viewing screen and witnesses Spock creeping around the corridor on his way to them, which Garth finds fascinating. Spock arrives and the door opens, but he now faces the problem of having a double dose of Kirk.
Look at me carefully, Spock. Can't you tell I'm your captain?
Queen to Queen's level 3.
I won't answer that. That's exactly what he wants to know. Very clever, Garth. That's exactly what I was going to say. What are you doing?
Arranging to beam down a security team. Are there any objections?
Yes. They may walk into a trap. That's right. Garth can destroy us.
Fascinating. What maneuver did we use to defeat the Romulan vessel near Tau Ceti?
Very good, Spock. The Cochrane deceleration. Spock. You know the Cochrane deceleration is a classic battle maneuver. Every starship captain knows that.
Agreed, Captain. Captains. Gentlemen, whichever one of you is Captain Garth must at this moment be expending a great deal of energy to maintain the image of Captain Kirk. That energy level cannot be maintained indefinitely, and I have time.
I really enjoyed that, the concept, but there was an obvious weakness. He asked one question which apparently wasn't specific enough, but it'd been very easy just to say, okay, tell me what we had for lunch yesterday, or what's Sulu's favourite type of cheese.
Yeah, but I think he had a plan that didn't involve questions. He wants this fight to happen.
That's true, yeah.
And a fight's what we get, because realising that what he's heard is true, Garth, as Kirk attacks Spock, knock him to the ground, and then the two Kirks wrestle with Spock watching on.
And he can't obviously shoot because he's not entirely sure which one to shoot. I'm thinking that two Kirks, the ladies must love that. Imagine that, a little, the two of them.
It's hard to imagine. At the end of this battle, one is holding the chair over the other's head, ready to smash it on his opponent's face.
One begs Spock to shoot the other, but the other claims that he must shoot both to save the Enterprise, and this does it for Spock.
Yes, he shoots the first guy, who changes into Garth as he falls, and Spock switches off the force field so Kirk can contact the Enterprise and give Scotty the countersign Queen to King's level 1.
Yeah, I think he delivers the Dr. Livingston quote here as well.
Yes, yeah, and Captain Kirk, I presume.
He's from just along the road from where I used to play.
Yeah.
I used to play in the David Livingston sports fields as a kid.
The fields outside the David Livingston Centre are quite ample.
Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure, was he a good guy?
I think he wasn't too bad compared to some of them.
I think he was anti-slavery, wasn't he? But still, he was going over there trying to...
Still proselytising.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's a bad guy, but not as bad as some of them.
Yeah, okay.
We then come to some sort of clinic where the inmates are getting their jabs, and there's a pointless discussion between McCoy and Corey about whether the injections should be intramuscular or intravenous. Apparently the effects will begin almost immediately, and we see this with Garth, who's being treated and is clearly being lobotomised.
Apparently, yeah.
He doesn't remember anybody, doesn't really know who he is, and he kind of wanders off mindlessly with Corey.
I think he shakes Kirk's hand, and as he's being led peacefully away by Corey, he turns and asks if he should know him.
Exactly.
Kirk says no, and when Garth exits, he asks Spock why it was so hard for him to tell the difference between the two of them.
Spock says it wasn't, and it didn't even take that long from his perspective, but obviously it must have felt longer if you were one of the two Kirks.
Well, I think he says he was waiting for Garth to win the fight.
Yes, he assumed that on the basis of Kirk having been previously tortured.
Of course, yeah. I mean, 100% Kirk would easily defeat Garth.
Kirk notes that Spock must have let himself be hit in the head, and that's not what Solomon would have done. That's a reference to the shoot us both thing. It's a biblical reference.
Was that what it was? Okay, I wasn't sure. King Solomon's Mines, that's all I know.
It's the one about cutting the child in half.
Ah, right, okay, yeah.
So now they beam up and head off on another adventure.
They do.
Garth reminded me a bit of a cross between Graham Chapman in The Life of Brian and Gene Wilder in Willy Wonka.
Yeah, I can see that. He was a very, very charismatic actor character.
Do you think he was lobotomised at the end? I think he was faking it so he could try and take over again in about 5 minutes' time.
Well, I assume it doesn't happen, but it would be good to, if that was the case, and with another episode where they were tracking him down again or getting involved, it'd be good to see more of him.
Yeah.
Like Mud.
And with those 14 people treated, is that the end of mental illness?
Yeah, of course.
It's not...
Those were the last 14.
They must have genetic tests where they can tell if it's coming in any newborns.
Of course. Give them a little jab and you're fine.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the episode?
No, I really liked it.
Yeah, it was a strong episode.
Very.
Better than Dagger of the Mind that it's similar to.
I would say so, yes.
Although it didn't have Dr. No.
No.
From the Christmas party.
Oh, it did have Martha.
It did.
Very capable substitute.
Okay. Originally aired on the 3rd of January 1968. Directed by Herb Wallerstein, who we've heard about before. Second of his 4 episodes. You can go back to the podcast for the Tholian Web to hear a bit more about him. 2 people credited as writing this episode. Lee Erwin. It's the only contribution to the series, but he also wrote for shows like Tarzan, Bewitched and Flipper. And died in 1972 when he was 65. It was Soul's 3rd episode, and you can hear more about him if you go back to the podcast for the Corbomite Maneuver. Garth of Izar was played by Steve Inat. Born in the former Czechoslovakia, the part that's now Slovakia. He was just 34 at the time this episode was filmed.
No.
And died at the age of 37 from a heart attack in 1972 on his wife's 30th birthday.
Okay, we have to mention this. Look at him. Watch this episode again. Was he made up to look older?
I think he must have been, because he's playing a character 10 years older than Kirk, but he as an actor is a few years younger than William Shatner.
You could easily have said he was 54.
I would say so. Most of the haircut.
That was a shocker. People really did look an awful lot older back then, didn't they?
Back in the day, yeah.
34.
I mean, even Kirk looks like he's in his 40s.
Yeah.
Inat also appeared in shows like Ironside and Mission Impossible, as well as the movie Madigan, opposite Richard Wildmark and Star Trek alum Michael Dunn. Yvonne Craig played Marta. You'll have recognised her.
Mm-hmm.
Best known for her work as Batgirl on the original Batman series, or maybe for dating Elvis.
Did she?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was her only Star Trek appearance, but she was also in shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Kojak, and she died in 2015 when she was 78.
Was she one of the ones Elvis, was she about 12 when Elvis dated her?
Who can say?
I think he did have a penchant for a touch of the R. Kellys.
Did he? No, let's not make any allegations here.
I'm sure Priscilla, I think it's well known.
Key Luke played director Corey in his only Star Trek role, although he was considered for a role in The Next Generation that ultimately went to Brent Spiner. You recognised him, obviously, from Gremlins.
Yeah, I did, yes.
Where he played the grandfather. You think he was in Gremlins 2 as
he was.
Somebody else. Same character, different character?
I imagine it's the same character, yeah.
He also appeared as Lee Chan in the Charlie Chan movies, Number One Son. He appeared in shows like MacGyver, T.J. Hooker, and The A-Team.
I will definitely have seen him in those shows.
And he died in 1991 when he was 86.
Good age.
No Columbo connection this week, apart from the regulars. Some trivia. Leonard Nimoy complained to the producers when he got this script about how similar it was to Dagger of the Mind. Mm-hmm. Garth's outfit might have looked familiar. It was worn on the bridge by the High Commissioner in the episode The Galileo 7. Remember the one that wanted to get out there and leave Spock to die?
Mm-hmm.
This was another one of those episodes that the BBC banned for sadistic violence. Garth refers to a battle at Axanar.
So what was the sadistic? There wasn't any violence in this, really, was there?
Corey was being suspended.
That's not sadistic.
And then tortured in the torture chair.
Right, okay.
Anyhow, Garth and I think Kirk referred to this Axanar battle. That battle was due to be the subject of a major crowd-funded fan film that ultimately led to the major crackdown on that sort of production because the copyright holders perceived that there were profits being made. Yeah,
I've never understood how the franchise let these people get away with it for so long. It wasn't like you and your pals with a camcorder. This was proper actors doing... This
Axanar was going to be absolutely... I think they'd raised over $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, we try and fire up an episode on YouTube with a clip and it gets taken down.
Yeah. Well, nowadays it does because of this.
Yeah.
If you look into the Axanar story, if you don't know about it, it's quite interesting. It's a good story, depending on what view you take. You know, hubris on the part of the producers or heavy-handedness on the part of the copyright holders. The repeated use of the phrase Marta, my dear, is believed to be a nod to the track Martha, my dear on the Beatles' recently released White Album. I think it came out a couple of months earlier.
Okay.
In terms of international titles, only a couple that aren't literal. In Italy, the episode was Il Sogno di un Folle, which means the dream of a madman. And in Japan, it was as straightforward as always. They went with Ushu no Seishin Byoin, which means lunatic asylum in space.
Okay.
It's not really in space, it's on a planet. So it's in space as we are.
That's true. What have we got next week?
It's the 15th episode of Season 3. Let that be your last battlefield.
Oh, what a title. Too long a title.
As the crew encounter people with firmly rooted beliefs. It's a good episode.
Is it?
Yes.
Another
described.
strong one. Okay, good.
In the meantime, we're on social media. You can find us at Trek Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram and on Facebook. You can look at our YouTube channel to see all the episodes there, or go to astartrekpodcast.com where there's a post up for each and every episode we cover. And we'll see you
Next time.
Cheerio.
Bye bye.